ceased to exist, but irreverent barrister lives on with $3.8 million gift to monash UNI. The death notice in The Age on April 7, 2015, would have startled the casual reader. "I have ceased to exist," it said. No funeral ceremony by direction, but in life, criminal barrister Francine McNuff was notoriously wry and straight-talking, so her friends weren't surprised. Ever pragmatic and to the point, Miss McNuff, as clients addressed her, had penned the notice herself. 2 years before she faxed it, she didn't do email, or computers in general, to her friend and solicitor, Ron Tate. In her later years, Ms. McNuff lived in a modest 1970s-style brown brick unit in a southeastern Melbourne suburb, and had driven a 30-year-old Mercedes. She wasn't into travel or dining out, but in fact, she was wealthy, owning 20 houses and flats in Melbourne and Shepparton. She had no children or partner and had carefully thought about how to direct her money for good before she died. She arranged to donate $4 million to Melbourne University, to fund a chair in criminology and a chair in human rights, and on Monday, Monash University Vice-Chancellor Professor Margaret Gardner will announce that Ms. McNuff bequeathed her remaining estate of $3.8 million to her alma mater, Monash University. It is Monash's biggest bequest from an alumnus. Of that, $2 million will establish a Francine McNuff Chair in Criminal Jurisprudence, and $1.8 million will support 2 PhD students from disadvantaged backgrounds annually to study criminology. Ron Tate, a friend of Ms. McNuff from her time studying law at Monash from 1966, says she stood out for her intellect, her red hair, her vivacity, and as one of the few female students after finishing her degree in 1971, she lectured at Monash for 10 years. Earning a Master of Laws in 1978. In 1983, age 35, she became the first Victorian woman appointed to a judicial post when made a Children's Court stipendiary magistrate. She became a criminal barrister in 1987, specializing in sex crime cases. For 7 years, from 2002, she mentored Ron Tate's solicitor son Brett, who was Ms. McNuff's associate in many court cases. Brett remembers her talking strategy at cafes during lunch breaks as she chain-smoked menthol cigarettes and sipped black tea with lemon. She would never eat lunch during a trial, he says. Ms. McNuff was also a technophobe who preferred to use a typewriter and a fax machine. She wouldn't have a mobile phone, so her clerk got her a pager. She would handwrite on stuff you sent her, and send it back, he says, although she wanted a computer towards the end. Ron says she was respected by all her clients, even underworld figures. He remembers talking to her outside the county court in William Street one morning in 2004 when notorious criminal Andrew Benji Veneman approached her. Veneman said, "Hi, Miss Ensign, how are you?" Ron says. To which she replied, "Fine, Benji, how are you?" Hours later, Veneman was shot dead in self-defense by gangland identity Mick Gatto. About 6 months ago, a woman whom Ms. McNuff had successfully defended in the early 1990s on a murder charge, she was acquitted, asked Ron how Ms. McNuff was. When told she had passed away, the woman burst into tears, Ron says. Brett Tate says Ms. McNuff could, at first, come across as a cold person. But once you got to know her, she was a very warm person. Just extremely private, Brett says. She didn't socialize. She had a very small group of very close people around her who would do anything for her. I count myself as one of them. Ron believes her Monash days in the 1960s were happy ones. The university comprised a much smaller number of buildings surrounded by paddocks, and the law faculty was a close-knit community at a time of anti-Vietnam War protests, when students would hang out at the Knot Pub and the UNI's Soul Cafe. When he acted as a solicitor in court, Ron says Francine was my criminal barrister of choice, because she was so good. Because her knowledge of the law, of the rules of evidence and whatnot, was spot on. A desperate judge once had his associate discreetly ask her to help write his charge to the jury, the speech summing up the evidence, towards the end of a sex crime trial that she was not involved in. She declined. Ron says the bequest to Monash made him smile. Given Ms. McNuff's terse death notice and no frills send-off, 6 people watched her coffin being lowered at Brighton Cemetery. These scholarship students, their lives will be changed forever because of what she's done, he says. Her name and her memory will live in perpetuity. So she hasn't ceased to exist. Bad luck, Francine. She never usually got things wrong. But she got this absolutely wrong.